Welcome. Welcome to our final event of the second annual New York Jewish Book Festival here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. I'm really thrilled that you're all here to see Lois Lowry and Sean Hartley discuss Lowry's award-winning and classic book, Number the Stars, which means so much to us at the museum. I hope that many of you have been able to see Courage to Act, Rescue in Denmark, up on the third floor. It's our new exhibit about the Danish rescue. It's for people from 9 to 99. And really, I think of it as a companion to Lois's book. So if you haven't seen it today, I hope that you come back and see it in the future. In preparation for the brief Q&A that will follow this conversation, our team has handed out some note cards. We'll be collecting those before the end of the conversation. Lois will kindly stay to sign books in the back there, and we will have them available for purchase with credit card. You can also go online to the museum's online store and purchase them and just show us the receipt. If you do that, make sure to choose pickup as your delivery method, and there's no delivery being charged. And lastly, if you have to pay in cash, you have to go downstairs to our shop and then bring the book back up. I hope that you've enjoyed all of our other events. And we have events throughout the year, almost every week. We have multiple events, and we're also going to be having a lot of family events going forward. You'll all be signed up, I think, if you've pre-registered to our newsletter, and if you haven't, go on check mjhnyc.org/events to see what we've got going on. We're very grateful that the Book Festival is made possible in part by support from the Battery Park City Authority, our good friends, and your support also sustains us and all of our educational programming. So now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. Lois Lowry is the author of more than 40 books for children and young adults, including the New York Times bestselling Giver Quartet and the popular Anastasia Krupnik series. She's also received countless honors, among them the Boston Globe Horn Book Award, the Dorothy Canfield Fisher Award, the California Reader Medal, and the Mark Twain Award. She received Newbery Medals for 2 novels, Number the Stars and The Giver. Sean Hartley is the director of musical theater at Kaufman Music Center in New York City, where he curates, produces, and often hosts the series Broadway Close-Up and Broadway Playhouse. Hartley is a lyricist, composer, and playwright, and his works for television have been shown on the Disney Channel and others. His works for children include Number the Stars, which I'm so excited to hear, and he'll share that with us today. He teaches at Special Music School, One Day University, and Lucy Moses School. So Lois and Sean, welcome. Thank you so much.
Funny phenomenon. His voice was going out there, and I was sitting behind him, so I couldn't hear what he was saying. Did he say nice stuff about me? Let us hope so. I don't know if we can turn the ceiling lights off or whether it matters, but it's important to me that you be able to see the screens. I can't see this one, but they'll be the same on both sides. I am nothing without my photographs. I'll try to explain to you what each one is, but I hope you can see them okay. And now let us all pray that the clicker works, because I'm going to go to the first photograph, which is simply a copy of this book. It's first edition. The cover now looks more like this. It's mostly blue, but that first edition had a black background. And it was published in, okay, now we need some math people here in the room to do the quick math. It was published in 1988, I'm guessing. I could look at the copyright date. 89, published in 1989. So how many years ago was that? Some fourth grader here will know the answer. It's 10, many, many, many years ago. And it's had a very long life, but it's had a life that has also, in addition to the editions that you've read or been familiar with, a long life in other countries, and I'm going to show you a few of those. This will also, like the math, require some audience participation, because when a book is published in another language and in another country, they send the author several copies. and the author doesn't always know what that language is. And so you look inside to see what city it was published in. And if it says Budapest, then you know that that language was Hungarian. But I don't have the copies here, so I can't look them up. So that's why I'm asking for audience participation. Hungarian? Okay, so that was the first one. Inside that, it will say Budapest. Ready? Turkish, okay. Interestingly, this book was published many years ago, and many years ago in Turkish. More recently, since Turkey's government has become much more conservative, the book has been removed from the Turkish schools. Just like Naples, Florida. I should know this one because I spent part of my childhood in Japan, but suddenly I don't know if that is Japanese or Chinese. Chinese, okay. What do you think? Dutch? Dutch or Flemish, perhaps? Portuguese? I'm guessing. And Spanish. Okay, you're all going to know the next one. Say it with me. No, here it is in Hebrew. There is one other that I'm going to show you in another language, but I'm saving it too close to the end because it's very special to me. Okay. Let me back up a minute. Let me stay on this for a minute. Over the years, since the publication of this book, I have spoken to, I don't know how many, hundreds, maybe thousands of school groups, teachers' conventions, and I have always, often with photographs, gone through the history of what happened in Denmark in 1943, because people didn't know it. But now, I'm not going to do that with you because you already know it, partly because of this remarkable exhibition here in this museum, and partly because some of you read Number the Stars when you were kids, and some of you are still kids. Okay, so instead of going through the history, I'm instead going to talk about the creation of the book itself. And to do that, I'm going to talk about three separate people. And the first one is my friend Annelise Henriksen Platt, who was my Danish friend and to whom the book is dedicated. It says to Annelise, and then it says tusind tak, 1,000 thanks. Annelise and I became friends, we're the same age, in this country, but she had grown up in Denmark and was a child in Denmark, in Copenhagen, when I was a child in a small town in Pennsylvania. She met later in her life an American, I started to say lawyer, but an American Army officer, married him, moved here, and he went to Yale Law School. And she ended up in Portland, Maine, where I lived, married to a lawyer, and we became friends. Our sons were the same age and best friends. Her son had a very Danish name, Torben. I can't remember if I used it in the book. I do remember a wonderful story about Torben. When he was about 2, he was a very shy little boy with wonderful blonde hair. And she said, one time he was riding in a supermarket basket with his little legs dangling, and somebody swooped at him and said, "Oh, aren't you the cutest little boy?" and went on, tousled his hair. "What's your name?" And he said, "Torben." "What kind of name is that? That's a strange name, Torben." And she said, her little boy said, "It means God of Thunder." I did use his name in the book. I named the kitten that. Okay, so this is my friend Annelise. And one time, during our lengthy friendship, she and I had a chance to sit and talk, just the two of us, and we talked about our childhoods. And I had had a sister who died young, my older sister, and so had she. It was something we had in common, that loss when we were young. And I asked her, my sister had died of cancer. I asked her what happened to her sister, and she said my sister was newly married, expecting a baby, and she and the baby both died when the child was born. And I said, how could that happen in Denmark? Denmark is a very modern country. I have been to Denmark. I know they have good medical care. She said, it was 1943. And she said we had not enough to eat. It was the coldest winter in years. We were cold, and we didn't have good medical care at that time. We were occupied by the Nazis. Okay, I had probably learned about that in school. I had studied history. I'd gone to college. I'd gone to graduate school, but I didn't remember what had happened in Denmark until she told me. And I was already at that point in my life a writer of books for young people. And I thought right away, this is a story I should tell for kids, because if they hear it as a story that makes an impression, they will remember it the way I had not. So that's Annalisa. She'll return later. This is my own granddaughter, age 10. She also is going to return in a little bit. And this is not a person because I have no photograph of her. Her name I put on the bottom is Helen Bowman. I'm just realizing that the poor people sitting on the stage can't see the photographs. If you girls want to sit on the floor here and look at them, that's okay. But then you'll have to jump up and start singing. You can do that. Okay, I put this generic photograph of a fourth grade class just to remind you of what you look like when you're in fourth grade. Helen Bowman was a fourth grade teacher. I was 8 years old in fourth grade. I think I was a little young because I had skipped a grade. But at any rate, 8, 9, thereabouts. And so here are kids in a fourth grade classroom. And there's their teacher's name, Helen Bowman. After the book was published, maybe a few years after, I was in Tennessee to speak to a teachers' convention. And I had time to roam around, and there were workshops going on in various rooms, and I just wandered into one. And this teacher, Helen Bowman, was speaking to her audience of teachers about the teaching of this book. I hadn't known that that was going to be happening in the room that I entered, but there it was. So I sat down. She didn't know the author of the book was there. And I listened to her talk about teaching this book. And this is why I've included her. This is many years ago. Okay, she said that particular year, her school was undergoing renovations. And so they had put a lot of classrooms in the gym with temporary partitions. Horrible way to be having to teach. But nonetheless, she said she remembered from previous years that kids loved this book. So she began to read it aloud one day at a time, one chapter at a time. And she described how after reading perhaps just the first chapter, the kids asked her questions about the countries, where they were exactly. And so she found a map and hung it on the wall. And I've put a map there because then she saw the kids. She didn't talk about the map specifically, but she had read this. If I can find it. When you have a book, when you're writing a book, a piece of fiction that deals with history, you have to find a way to put the information in that won't make it turn into a textbook. And so here, I knew I had to have the information about the geography. So here it describes, Papa, Annemarie, had said, the child in the book is 10, but she's remembering a time earlier. Annemarie had said finally into the silence, sometimes I wonder why the king wasn't able to protect us. Why didn't he fight the Nazis so they wouldn't come into Denmark with their guns? Papa sighed. We're such a tiny country, he said, and they're such an enormous enemy. Our king was wise. He knew how few soldiers Denmark had, and he knew that many Danish people would die if we fought. In Norway, they fought, Annemarie pointed out. Papa nodded. They fought very fiercely in Norway. They had those huge mountains for the Norwegian soldiers to hide in, but even so, Norway was crushed. In her mind, Annemarie had pictured Norway as she remembered it from the map at school, up above Denmark. So now here are these fourth grade kids, they're listening to this, and they're going to the map, and they look, they see Norway on the map. Norway, it says, was pink on the school map, and she imagined the pink strip of Norway crushed by a fist. Are there German soldiers in Norway now, the same as here? Yes, Papa said. In Holland, too, Mama added from across the room, and Belgium, and France. Not in Sweden, Annemarie announced, proud that she knew so much about the world. So there's a lot of geographical information, which the reader, the child reading the story, needs to know, but told as part of a conversation, as part of dialogue. And then she said she would see the kids going up to the map privately to each other, saying, look how big Germany is. Look how little Denmark is compared. Look how close Sweden is. So then they have that information, which they can use to appreciate the story. Then Mrs. Bowman told her audience, she was a teacher in Johnson City, Tennessee. She was not Jewish. She had one Jewish child in the class. And after the first one or two chapters, that child came up to her and said, Mrs. Bowman, my grandmother called this weekend, and she always asks what I'm reading. And I told her about this book, and she wants to come and visit, and she wants to come talk to our classroom. So Helen Bowman said, of course, we would love to have your grandmother come. Secretly, she said she was thinking, oh, great. Grandmother, she knew, was a professor at the University of Michigan. She said, here I have the kids involved in this story, and now a scholar is going to come in and bore them. But she said, of course your grandmother can come. And on the appointed day, David proudly brought his grandmother, an imposing woman, and his mother, the daughter of his grandmother. Mother sat in the back of the room. Grandmother went to the front, professor from the University of Michigan. And she began by saying, I was a Jewish child in Germany in the 1930s. And she told of her escape as a child from Germany at that time. Helen Bowman said the children were mesmerized. Here was history coming to life. And the woman didn't talk long. She wasn't boring. But when she finished, there was a noise in the back of the room, and they turned and saw that her mother, her daughter, David's mother, was crying. And she apologized. She said, I never heard my mother's story before. This is my fourth graders again, just to remind you who we're talking about. And now, here in the book, my friend Annalisa had told me that she remembered as a child waving to the king when he rode his horse past each day in the streets of Copenhagen. And so I put that in. But in doing the research, I came across this actual story, which purports to be true. But I put it into the voice of Annemarie's father. One evening, Papa told her earlier he was on an errand near his office, standing on the corner, waiting to cross the street, when King Christian came by on his morning ride. One of the German soldiers, I think I've got them in the next picture. Yeah. One of the German soldiers had turned suddenly and asked a question of a teenage boy nearby. Who is that man who rides past here every morning on his horse? The German soldier had asked. Papa said he smiled to himself. He was amused that the German soldier didn't know. He listened while the boy answered. He's our king, the boy told the soldier. He's the king of Denmark. Where is his bodyguard? The soldier had asked. And do you know what that boy said, Papa had asked Annemarie? She was sitting on his lap. She was little then. She shook her head, waiting to hear the answer. And the boy looked right at the soldier and he said, all of Denmark is his bodyguard. And certainly, of course, as we know, that proved to be true. As a writer, you look for details to put in that will make a story come to life. And when you're writing a story based on fact, you can't make up the details. But I was in the Resistance Museum in Copenhagen when I saw these shoes. The shoes, actually, they weren't these shoes. It was a different pair. These are not as ugly as the ones I saw. But the shoes I saw in Copenhagen were made, as these are, of fish skin. The Danes had no leather at that point. And so the little sister needs shoes, and her mother buys her shoes made of fish skin. And I put that in the book. I'll just read you that section briefly. I bought Kirsty some new shoes, Mrs. Johansen said. She's outgrown her old ones. I won't ever wear them, not if you chain me in a prison and beat me with sticks. Goodness, Kirsty, Ellen said. Ellen is the main character's friend. I wish my mother would get me some new shoes. I love new things. It's hard to find them in the stores. Not if you go to a fish store, Kirsty bellowed. Most mothers wouldn't make their daughters wear ugly fish shoes. But I put that in just to make the characters come alive a bit, to seem real. And in fact, if I was 7, as Kirsty is in the book, I would have said exactly the same thing if my mother had tried to make me wear shoes made out of fish. And here we have, and those of you who have been to Denmark know this place. This is Tivoli Gardens in the center of Copenhagen. And here in this section of the book, the girls, Annemarie and her friend Ellen, are reminiscing about what it was like before the soldiers moved in and occupied their country. She loved Tivoli Gardens in the heart of Copenhagen. Her parents had taken her there often when she was a little girl. She remembered the music and the brightly colored lights, the carousel and ice cream, and especially the magnificent fireworks in the evenings, the huge colored splashes and bursts of light in the evening sky. I remember the fireworks best of all, she said to Ellen. Me too, Kirsty said. I remember the fireworks. Silly, Annemarie scoffed. You never saw the fireworks. Tivoli Gardens was closed now. The German forces had burned part of it, perhaps as a way of punishing the Danes for their lighthearted pleasures. Okay, I'm going to stop there because of the mention of Tivoli Gardens, which is a cue. Take it away. Oh, have we explained to them about the past performances? I really couldn't hear what he was saying.
No, we're doing some songs from a musical version of Number of the Stars, which was done at Kaufman Music Center. And this first song is actually very early in the book. If you remember, the girls are coming home from school and they're running, and the German soldiers stop them and interrogate them about where they're going. So this is immediately after the German soldiers have left them alone.
I was so scared. Me too. Well, good for you. Remember how it was before the war? She doesn't. It was wonderful. Remember how we used to play tag after dinner? Ollie, ollie, free in the street and in the park. Now we stay at home and we never go out after dark. 3 years of fighting, 3 years of war.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Okay, I'm not going to be able to read this from where I'm sitting, but this is just a little bit of history that isn't in the book and is not in the exhibition that I recall. But I think it's important to remember this man, Georg Duckwitz, who was German, and who was the one who alerted the Danish authorities that the directive had come from Hitler to round up the Jews in 1943. And this guy, the Lutheran bishop in Denmark, that's the state church of Denmark, Protestant church, Lutheran. And I can't see it from here. And from there, you won't hear me. Let me try, because this is important. Just once this word was known that this was going to happen, the Lutheran bishop, I can't do it. He wrote a letter which was read on a Sunday morning in every Lutheran church in Denmark. And do we have a volunteer with a loud voice to read that? Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I think that's an important thing to remember and honor and take a picture of. The Danish Constitution had outlawed, what's the word I want, discrimination based on race or religion when it was formed, when it was written in, I'm going to get the date wrong, the early 1800s, a time when we still had slavery in this country. Okay, this is just another map showing how close Denmark is to Sweden. And now we're moving up the coast. I had, of course, since I was creating fiction, I could have chosen any one of a number of places that the family would go to be rescued and taken to Sweden. And this is a little fishing village up the coast in Denmark, Gilleleje. And so the Uncle Henrik, made-up character, lives there. And the family is taking their Jewish friend, their child's best friend, up to the farm, and from there, she doesn't know it, of course, she'll be taken to Sweden. This is the end of October in 1943. And this is what Uncle Henrik's farm would have looked like. I think it mentions the cow. Her name is Blossom. And we're back to Mrs. Bowman's fourth grade class because, again, she told this to the group that I was observing, that she decided, the kids were loving this book so much, she decided to use it to teach some other subjects besides history. And so what was the term she used? Oh, figurative language. And so she asked the kids to look for examples. By now they're partway through the book. Look for examples of figurative language in the book. And a little girl raised her hand and read this passage. And it takes place when the children have arrived. I don't have enough hands here. Have arrived at Uncle Henrik's farm. It says, they walked on through the woods until the path opened to a meadow dotted with cows. Here the path skirted the edge of the field along a fence, and beyond it they could see the gray sea ruffled by wind. the breeze moved the high grass. And this little girl very cleverly said, the sea isn't ruffled. Ruffled is the figurative language. And the little girl was wearing a blouse with a ruffled sleeve. And she said it meant the water looked like this. The sea was ruffled by wind. And when I heard her describe that, I remember chuckling to myself because I had originally written that the sea was pleated by wind, envisioning this kind of pleated skirt. And then I remember thinking, kids that age wouldn't know what pleated means. So I changed it to ruffled. Okay, so then Mrs. Bowman said, a little boy in the class raised his hand. He wanted to give his passage of, what did I call it? Figurative language. And he read this. And she said this particular little boy was not one of her best students, but she was interested to hear what he would choose. The house and the meadows that surrounded it were so much a part of her childhood, a part of her life, that she didn't often look at them with fresh eyes. But now she did, seeing her friend Ellen's pleasure. And it was true what Ellen had said. They were beautiful. The little boy read that passage. The teacher, Mrs. Bowman, said, very good. The author has described how beautiful. And the boy said, no, it's not that. He said, it's fresh eyes. He said, eyes aren't fresh like bread or eggs. He said, you remember the day that David's grandmother was here and his mother was in the back of the room and she started to cry? He said, his mother was seeing her own mother with fresh eyes. This is, of course, and you've seen one of these in the exhibition here, one of the actual fishing boats that rescued Jews those fall nights in 1943. This is another one. And finally, this is one of the actual fishermen, photographed many years later. But you can just tell from the look on his face the kind of guy he was and would have been that night in 1943. Okay, Sean, take it away once more. And can you describe, is there a background you need to describe?
No, this is just Uncle Henrik's entrance. And
I will just say, I saw this show when it was first performed many years ago. And the stage, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, was dark. On the side of the stage, there is a pile of coiled rope, and the fisherman is sitting on the rope and sings this song.
When the sky is cloudy and the moon is hidden from the sea, meet me at the dock, bring a compass and a candle. Come silently. The boat we sail is small and frail and leaky in the bow. So bring a pail, I'll show you how to bail. There'll be no friendly starshine to guide the way to Sweden in the night. But hate is on the hunt, and darkness is safer than the light. I don't know your name, and in better times we barely said hello. But you need my help, that's all I need to know. So when the moon is hidden from the sea, we shall go. When the moon is hidden from the sea, we shall go.
One of the other true stories that I read in doing research and was not able to incorporate into the book was this, and this was, of course, long before Sean wrote that song. It described a Jewish businessman in Copenhagen getting a telephone call, as many Jewish people did on that day, telling him you have to hide your family, alerting him to what is about to happen. And he was stunned, and he commuted into Copenhagen by train each day. So he went immediately to the train station and got on a train to go back to his home. And the train conductor, because he rode the train each day, recognized him and said to him, "Is something wrong? Are you ill? You don't look well, and it's the middle of the day." And this gentleman blurted out what he had just learned, that the Jews were in danger, were about to be rounded up, and that he had been told to hide his family, and he didn't know how to do that. He was going home, but he didn't know where he would take his wife and children. And the train conductor said to him, "Bring them to my house." And he said, "I don't even know you. I don't know your name." And the train conductor held out his hand and said, "My name is Carstensen." And it's just a small story. And when I first heard that song and heard the words, "I don't even know your name," it brought that back. I was sorry I couldn't use it in the book. I'm delighted that Sean was able to use it. Oh, I wanted to mention just a few. There have been so many, hundreds, perhaps thousands of letters, emails, reactions to this book over the years. And so I've just selected a very few of them. Again, I'm not going to be able to read them. I may call upon my reader, but I don't need to for this one. This is just a little boy who in Connecticut decided for his bar mitzvah, having read this book, that instead of a traditional party and receiving the traditional fountain pens, he wanted to go to Denmark. And he had his bar mitzvah at the synagogue there, and he traveled with his family up the coast to the village, which is depicted in the book. He's all grown up now. I can't see the date on that paper, but it was a long time ago. Okay, reader, I need you. This is from a school teacher in Canada.
The way in which Annemarie and her family assist the Rosens, based on friendship and regardless of religion, has an enormous impact with my students. Each year, my students get more and more excited about the book, and it has become a hit even with boys, despite the heroine being a 10-year-old girl. In fact, I've had several boys each year comment it's the best book they've ever read. Much of that I attribute to the last chapter and your afterword. Everyone is always amazed by the rabbit's blood and cocaine saving the day. However, I think one of the most memorable moments of doing Number the Stars with my class was at the end of the novel when one of my Muslim boy students announced to the class, "Man, I love the Jews." It's amazing to see how your book has had such a positive impact where the words uttered by my young student would not be welcome in some areas of the world. My students really see themselves as the same, regardless of religion.
Thank you. And this one, I'm not going to take the time to have him read, but it came early on. I can't see the date. It was a long time ago, from a child who I think said she was born in this country, but her parents were immigrants who had escaped from Vietnam, and her sister had died during that escape. And she said the book reminded her of her own history. And I think down in the last paragraph, she said, if you would consider doing another book, maybe about the Vietnam rescue, which I have not done. But it was a one more of so many heartwarming letters. This is a photograph of an actual resistance fighter after he has been arrested by the Nazis. and photographed. I don't know anything about him, but when I came across his face, I just wanted to share it. The other one is this one. On the left, 20, does it say 21, 22 years old? And when I saw his photograph at the Resistance Museum in Copenhagen, I was struck by the, not resemblance, but he reminded me of my own son, who was the same age as the boy in the Danish photograph. More about him in a minute. The Resistance Museum burned down a few years ago, and it has been rebuilt, and I've not been to the new one, but I'm told they still have the fish skin shoes. They do have there these posts. This is the original photograph. These are the posts there at Revangen Square where the resistance fighters, like the young man you just saw, were tied to those posts and executed. And those posts are still there now as part of a memorial garden, and there are always flowers and wreaths placed at their base. The Danes are so proud of their resistance fighters, and there's a long wall. I didn't include that, listing the names of each one who died there. And this is a sculpture in that garden. The Nazis did not release, they did not mark the graves, and they did not release the bodies to their families. At the end of the war, the bodies were returned to the families, and this is a sculpture of a mother with the body of her son. And this is the child on the book cover, Swedish child. I used to be a photographer, and I used to specialize in portraits of children. Ordinarily, the writer has nothing to do with the cover of a book. Ordinarily, a writer is shocked and dismayed to see the cover of her book because she didn't envision it that way. But in this instance, the publisher asked me what I wanted the child to look like. And this was a Swedish child whom I had photographed some years before. So I gave them this photograph and said she should look like this. And they asked if they could use the photograph. I tracked down the Swedish parents, and they laughed, and they said, "You'll have to call her, she's all grown up now." And in fact, this beautiful little girl whom I photographed when she was 10 years old now has children who have finished college. So the book has been around a long time, but the photograph was around even longer than that. Often I am asked by kids why the Christian child is on the cover of the book and not the Jewish child. Annemarie is on the book cover and Ellen is not. And the reason is because the main character in a book is always the character who has to make decisions. That's what propels a plot. The character gets to a crossroads and decides, I'll do this or I'll do that, and the story continues because of the choices that character makes. In 1943 in Denmark, the Jews had no decisions to make. It was the Christians who made the decision to save the Jews, and that's why the Christian child's on the cover of the book. Okay, enough of Helen Bowman, the fourth grade teacher, though I will come back to her, but back to my 10-year-old granddaughter. And her father. This is the son that I thought of when I saw the picture of the resistance fighter. My son here, he is as a little boy there, 8 years old in the upper left, with his horse in the upper right, age 12. He decided when he was 12 that he couldn't live without having a horse. And we lived in Maine. We had plenty of land. It was not fenced, so we stalled, and finally we said, if you fence a piece of land, we'll get you a horse. And he gathered all his friends, to think of Tom Sawyer, and they would all, they took post hole diggers, nothing electronic, physical exercise, and they dug post holes. Maine has very rocky soil. They would dig 6 inches down and hit a rock, have to move the post hole digger elsewhere. One by one, the friends fell away, found more interesting things to do. But my son continued all summer long. First time I ever heard him use a swear word was when he hit a rock with that post hole digger. But we got him a horse. And he kept and took care of that horse until he got a driver's license, and then he gave the horse away. And in the bottom, that's me pinning his Eagle Scout badge on his uniform. Okay, with a determined kid like that, what is he gonna do when he grows up? And he became a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And when he was, there he is, with his Porsche, okay? That's what you do when you go to Germany, where he was stationed. And when he went to buy a Porsche, he was given a test drive by the young woman, the young beautiful woman, who was the office manager of the Porsche agency. And he got the car, and he got the girl, and here is my German daughter-in-law. And Annalisa, there in the upper corner, by that time had returned to Denmark. Denmark, as you know from the maps, has a border with Germany. It's just north of Germany, very close. And I called her and invited her to this wedding that was being held in Germany. She had known my son since he was a little boy. And she said, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." She said, I can't go to Germany ever. And I'm sure she's a lovely woman, and I'm sure she'll be a great daughter-in-law, but I don't want to meet any Germans ever. And so she did not come. And then, 7 years after that wedding, my son was killed in an F-15. And again, she said, when I called, that he was to be buried in Germany. She was sorry. She would not come to the funeral. She could just not set foot among Germans. This is my granddaughter, the day of her father's funeral. She was just 1.5 years old. I put together using photographs. I got a call on my reader again. I had snapshots from this child's short life with her father, and I put together the photographs with little rhyming memories.
When Papa was here, I sat on his lap. I wore a bonnet, he wore a cap. I rode on his shoulders way up by his head. He read me my stories and put me to bed. He showed me where flowers bloomed down by the path. And when we came home, Papa gave me a bath. He rubbed me and scrubbed me until I was clean. I called him Papa. He called me Baby. Now it's Mama who holds me and cuddles me near. We watch every night for the stars to appear. We love to remember when Papa was here.
Thank you. So she enjoyed hearing those little memories of the father she did not remember. And then when she was 4 years old, I took her to Copenhagen. And I told her I had a friend there who knew her papa when he was a little boy. And that my friend would tell her stories about mischief that her father had gotten into. And so she was looking forward to that. And off we went by plane to Copenhagen. And I called my friend Annalisa and invited her to have dinner with us at Tivoli Gardens, which of course is now restored and operating again. And she reluctantly agreed that she would do that. And my granddaughter's mother was with her, so my friend Annalisa was going to have to meet a German. And so off we went to Tivoli. And my granddaughter and my daughter-in-law and I were there at an outdoor restaurant, music playing, lights everywhere. The carousel is not in this picture, but you could hear its music. And we saw Annalisa come down the path, and I said to my granddaughter, "Here comes my friend who knew your papa." And my granddaughter, 4 years old, got up from her seat and ran down the path and met my friend and said, "You're going to tell me stories about my papa." And Annalisa, who said she would never meet a German, knelt and took this child into her arms. I think that's our future, it rests with our children. Okay. And this is the same child learning now to read in German schools, and this is the book she's assigned in 4th grade, Number the Stars in German. I will tell you that the German educational system takes their Holocaust education very, very seriously. They use this book, but they also, every high school student in Germany is required to visit a concentration camp. Howard and I were there at Dachau once and watched a busload of high school kids come in. And we watched them get off the bus, just like every high school group you've ever seen, poking each other, laughing, joking. And then we watched as they changed within minutes. Okay, this I can read because I've got it here in the book. This is the same resistance fighter who was executed there, tied to one of those poles. And the night before he was put to death, he was allowed to write a letter to his mother. And that's what I have printed there. This is just part of the letter. He says, "I want you all to remember that you must not dream yourselves back to the times before the war, but the dream for you all, young and old, must be to create an ideal of human decency, and not a narrow-minded or prejudiced one. That is the great gift our country hungers for, something every little peasant boy can look forward to and with pleasure feel he is a part of, something he can work and fight for." This young man has become quite an iconic figure in Denmark. Back to Helen Bowman, back to the 4th graders that she taught. She said that when she got to the end of the book, or before she read the last chapter, she went to a local jewelry store and bought a necklace like the one that's on the cover of the book and wore it that day. She said the kids noticed it right away. And as she read the final chapter, she saw the kids in her 4th grade classroom pass the necklace around, and each one of them pressed the Star of David into the palms of their hands. Helen Bowman is now retired from teaching, but she taught for many years, and for many, many years, children in her classroom pressed that symbol into the stars, into the palms of their hands. Okay, this is the psalm that I used in the book. I'm not going to ask him to read that. I'll find it in the book. I put the number on the slide, but I don't have it in the book. But, "Oh, praise the Lord, how good it is to sing psalms to our God. How pleasant to praise him. The Lord is rebuilding Jerusalem. He gathers in the scattered sons of Israel. It is he who heals the broken in spirit and binds up their wounds. He who numbers the stars one by one." When I'm asked why I chose the title for this book, I point out that it appears in this psalm, but throughout the book there are references to stars. Although, as this exhibition points out, it is not true, the myth that the king wore a star, yellow star in his uniform. The Jewish population was never asked to wear stars. Okay, star time. Go. This song is called Number.
This is called Number the Stars, and it is sung in the musical at the time when all of the Jewish people are walking through the woods on their way to the ship, really not knowing what lies ahead. And the whole cast sings it.
Who can count them? Who can number every star? Only God who made them knows how many there are. Who is watching? Who knows how we feel? Only God, but is God really real?
If there is a God who can do anything, why doesn't God help out? If there is a God who knows everything, why do I doubt? If there is a God who cares for us, why do we feel such pain? Does God feel pain too? Are there things God can't do? When I look up at the sky, I see Venus and Mars.
But I don't see God, and only God can number the stars.
Aren't they terrific? That's the end of my pictures and my presentation, and I've been given some unanswerable questions from the audience. I'll try. In recent years, this question says, many books have been banned, including your own. How can we help fight this? One, you can vote. I think that's the most important thing. You can run for office. You can wear a t-shirt that I wear. It says, I'm with the band, and it shows a number of books. I'm right between Margaret Atwood and Toni Morrison. It's a tough time for books and for this country. Oh, I said unanswerable. How about this one? What is the heart of the story? I think we each would have our own answer for that, and it would be a variation on the same answer. It has to do with personal integrity, which amazingly, part of the reason the Christian Danes were able to do what they did, I mean, setting aside the moral integrity it required, was their geography. It wasn't able to happen in some other countries. They had a very small Jewish population. They were close to Sweden. Sweden was neutral. The government of Sweden said they would take their Jews. Couldn't happen in Hungary or Poland or France. But that is not to deny what their personal integrity that they showed. And I don't know where that comes from. What are the hopes? What are your hopes, meaning me, for the future of stories and the future of your stories? Well, my time is running short. I've written 52 books, but I'm 86 years old. I've got a new one coming out next April, but I don't know how many more are left in me. And yet I told stories to my kids and to my grandchildren, as you do. And that's what we must all keep doing. We learn from stories and from the past. Again, where did the Danish spirit of humanity evolve from? Do we have any answer for that? Is that something that's ingrained in all of us, but it's suppressed in some places? Frankly, I said I can't answer these questions, and I can't, but I think they're questions worth all of us thinking about. How can we encourage our own children to advocate for themselves? Does anybody have a good answer for that? Is there an easy answer for that? You know, I suspect everybody here is already doing all the right things for your children. It's the people who aren't here that we need to help. I started to say to educate, but that's not it. We need to help people deal with a very complex and troubled situation in the world. Okay, I'm done. It has been a pleasure.